Hey guys, today I wanted to take a few minutes to show you my workspace, not only to encourage you to set up a custom workspace of your own, but also to help Photoshop users who are new to Clip Studio Paint migrate over with as few headaches as possible. One of the most powerful things about Clip Studio is that it's so customizable. My main wish is that Photoshop had a better brush engine for painting and a better animation workflow. But since that doesn't seem to be happening, I can make Clip Studio behave in all the ways that I'm used to in Photoshop. Since I'm constantly switching between Photoshop and Clip Studio, between all the projects day to day, it just helps reduce a little bit of brain clutter. Now, before I get into the shortcut remapping, I just want to talk a little bit about my workspace. Now, clearly I've rearranged things from the way they come by default when you install Clip Studio. I have all my tools on the right-hand side, and I'm right-handed, so I'm not reaching across the screen, every time I want to grab a tool. Everything is within a natural arc of my drawing hand. It does mean I'm painting a little bit more on the left side of my screen, but if I scoop my tablet or Cintiq a little bit to my right, or if I just sit a little bit to my left of my device, it does mimic the natural way I'd have a piece of paper on a table anyway, which is off to one side and not right in the center of my field of view. Now, arranging your palettes how you want is really easy. You basically grab the tab portion of a palette and just drag it where you want. Any palette can float anywhere you want on the screen. Just like in Photoshop, you can click this little icon here and it will minimize. But if you drag off to an edge, you'll see that a red line will appear, and if you just drop it there, it'll throw it to that portion of the screen. You can drag it on top of an existing space and it will turn into a tab, or you can go ahead and drag it underneath an existing palette, and then it will split that difference, and then you can resize it with the bar in the middle. Everything is collapsible, so I can collapse my toolbar there. I actually have another middle column here that I keep collapsed with my subtools and my tool properties. Again, trying to hide as many palettes as possible. Two things that allow me to do this are the quick access panel and also the customizability of the command bar, which is this strip of icons that runs across the top of the screen. The quick access palette is really amazing because it allows me to include just about any tool, action, or menu command into sets depending on my workflow, almost like a quicker version of changing workspaces. So here I have a set for painting, a set for sketching, and for example, a set for when I'm working on whiteboard animations. And it's powerful because I can put the same brush in multiple categories without duplicating brushes or cluttering my setup. So for example, here I have a rough pencil in my painting set, but it also exists in my sketching set. Again, this isn't a duplicate subtool. It's the same tool, except just organized into a quick access tab. Because of this, I can hide the toolbar and the subtool palettes if I want. So I already know at this point that these are the tools I'm most often using for most of my projects. It's really easy to add things into the quick access panel. So for example, if I wanted to go ahead and add another tool to my whiteboard setup, I would just find the tool that I want and literally just drag it in. Things are easy to rearrange as well. If you go ahead into the menu here, it says change order, and you can either select drag or command drag. I think it's safer to keep it on command drag, and this stops you from just dragging things around accidentally. Now, anytime in this video where you see the word command and you're on Windows, just swap it out for control. It does exactly the same thing. So command or control drag on Windows will allow you to go ahead and just rearrange these. You can also right click on the palette or control click and add separators. So for example, if I want to add a separator between these two, I'll select the top one, add a separator, and that gives me a little line. I can command drag these around and also delete. So I'll control click that and delete that shortcut from the quick access bar. You can even add color swatches. So again, I'll control click inside and add a drawing color. So if I'm on green and I use green all the time, I'll just add a drawing color there. If I use this red all the time, add a drawing color there, and these immediately switch my drawing colors. Super customizable and a great way to tailor your workspace for the different kinds of workflows that you have for your jobs. Now, I talked a little bit about using separators here, and it may not seem like it makes a huge difference visually, but it does help a lot when changing the view mode of the quick access panel. So for example, I have organized my painting tab to have the tools that I use for drawing with when I'm painting together, right, between one separator. I have my oil paint flat brushes together, cat's tongue, and my sculpt brushes and blenders and so forth. Now this list can get pretty long. So if you go up to the menu here and you say how to show, you can show these in various configurations. So for example, if all of your tools have uniquely identified icons, I can say, tile very small, and now you can see that they are grouped by the separators, which can really help, remembering where things are. The one I like to use typically is list 2-column, and that still gives me the name of what it is. It keeps my groups together in a 2-column format, but it still collapses things so it's nice and small. Now it's worth noting that you can also add menu items into the quick access bar. So let's assume that I put all the brushes that I want to into my quick access panel. I can use the menu and say quick access setting, or control click here and go to quick access setting. And all of the menus that are available to us in the menu system can now be put into the quick access setting. Now I don't typically use the quick access tabs for menu items, but for example, let's say we wanted to be able to always export a single layer JPEG all the time. Well, all I need to do is click JPEG and drag that in, and now I have an export as a JPEG button, and I can immediately export right from my quick access panel. So super powerful, very customizable. All of the same principles apply to the command bar at the top. Now here I tend to put all the tools that I use no matter what the workflow I'm in. Now of course I do have shortcuts, keyboard shortcuts for a lot of these as well. But sometimes when I'm working fast and I just feel like I need an icon, a visible icon, it's helpful to have these up here. So for example, I have my square selection, my lasso tool, lasso fill. This is one I use all the time. Close and fill, convert brightness to opacity, switch using layer color I use all the time as well. This is a good one because I'll often collapse my layer palette to be a little bit narrower than where the default location for change layer color shows up, so it'll often hide. So I'm kind of working about it in this zone. But what that does, if I'm sketching and doing some character work, let me just switch to a black color here. Right, I can just really quickly click that and it turns that layer into blue, and I can click it again and it goes back to my standard black color. It also works with folders. So if I stuck that into a folder and had additional layers in here, right, and I click the folder and click layer color, it applies that shade to the entire folder. Really handy to have. The other ones I have are buttons that go ahead and add new adjustment layers. If you're used to coming from Photoshop and Clip Studio, they're called correction layers. Those are usually found here in the menu system, new correction layer, but a little bit of hassle to get to. So this way I can easily come in, go ahead and add a curves, and that will add that tone curves right on top as a separate layer. I also have save as JPEG here, as well as a few animation shortcuts that I use often. You add tools to the command bar in the exact same way that you add tools to the quick access bar. Again, if I want to put a brush up there, all I need to do is go ahead and drag it in, right? I can control click that, delete it. I can command click it and drag it around. I can add separators by selecting the icon that I want to add a separator afterward. Click, add separator, puts it in there. I can click that separator and delete it. Again, just a real nice way to just keep your tools nice and organized. Now this is a place where I've also included some actions, right? So let me just go ahead and delete this layer here. And if I go to Window, Auto Action, I have programmed various actions just like you can do in Photoshop. For example, this one adds a bunch of light layers when I'm doing graphic novel coloring. I'll just delete those for a second. But if I go ahead and open the command bar settings, I can also access those actions here and say add light layers, and I'll just go ahead and either say add or drag that up. Appears as a folder, and whenever I want to add those, I just click it and it runs that action. Again, just a great way to speed up your workflow. The other thing you can add here in addition to tools, actions, or menu commands are palette pop-ups, right? So if I go here to command bar settings and I change this to pop-up palette, it gives me all the different palettes that I can add up there. Again, very powerful because I can close my whole subtool and tool property section because I'm not accessing it all the time, right? But if I happen to need, for example, a version of an airbrush that I don't use often and I don't have it in my quick access panel settings, I can just click the airbrush category and go ahead and choose the one I need. and immediately start using it. So this will always show me as the subtool palette all the variations, right, on any one of these categories. I also have the tool property palette. So again, I'm not accessing it all the time. If I really want to have it out, I could go ahead and just open it here or drag it out as a palette. But for the occasional time where I just need to go here and change stabilization or something, it's right up there. I also have my subtool detail, and much like Procreate behaves, right, you can just have that palette pop out. It'll disappear as soon as you make your selection. So think about the tools you use all the time. Consider putting those into your command bar. Think about the tools that you use per process or per project type. Throw those into your quick access settings. And don't forget that you have the ability to add pop-up palettes to your command bar as well. And that just allows you to go ahead and reduce the amount of palettes that you have up permanently on your screen. Another small thing I like to do is hide the title bar. So where that's found is under Window and Hide Title Bar. And all it will do is it will get rid of these minimize and maximize buttons. The shortcut for that is Shift Tab, as you can see here. And it's not a super crucial thing to do, but one of the reasons why I like to do it is that when the title bar is hidden and I do have to open up my palettes, it'll automatically maximize my document to the size that my palettes allow. When it's not hidden and I open and close my palettes, then it doesn't respond dynamically. So if you get used to it, it's a fun little thing to have enabled. Also, the tab button, just like in Photoshop, will hide all of your palettes so you can work in full screen. One nice detail about the tab functionality in Clip Studio is that it will only hide palettes that are currently open, but it will leave available palettes that are collapsed. So for example, if I have my sub view on and my color wheel and my color slider, and I hit tab because I want to work full screen, well, they all go away. But if I go ahead and collapse those and then hit tab, they still remain available to me so that I can work full screen, but have the palettes that I need still accessible. And using what we've learned, I can also add a layers pop-up for quick access to layers when I'm in my full screen mode. So let's do that real quick. I'll just go here to command bar settings, switch to pop-up palette, and let's go ahead and show the layers. And we can put that there. So when I'm not in full screen mode, I have my layers palette available there. But when I am in full screen mode, let's just say I'll close these for now and then open these up again. I still have access to my layers. I can go ahead and either check which one I'm on, make a quick little change, and then keep painting. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I'm constantly switching from Photoshop to Clip Studio Paint. So I want to make as many keyboard shortcuts behave the same way where possible. The first one I like to do both in Photoshop and Clip Studio is to map the front rocker button of my Wacom tablet to be the brush size. So if I grab just any old brush here and I'll make a new layer, by hitting the Option and Command buttons, I'm able to click and drag the size of my brush dynamically as I'm painting. So I'll go over here to my Wacom preferences, select the pen that I'm on, make sure I've added an application so that it only behaves that way in this particular application. Go to the front rocker of my pen, choose Modifier, which is under Keyboard. That will open up a window, and then I just select Option and Command. And that will go ahead and allow me now to use the button, the front of my button, for changing the size of my brush, any of the brushes that I'm on. Next, I'm going to reassign some existing Clip Studio Paint tool shortcuts to match those of Photoshop. The first one is the lasso tool. Now by default in Clip Studio, the lasso is M. So let's go over here to the shortcut settings, and we'll go to our tool, come over to selection, and I'm actually going to set the whole thing to L, which I have now. So the way to do that, if it's not currently there, so I'll just delete this shortcut for now. If there's nothing there or the letter M is there by default in Clip Studio, we'll say delete, and you just double click, hit the letter L, click out, and now it's set. Let's do the same thing for move layer. By default, it's K, and as you can see, I've set that to V. And now my L goes to my lasso tool, and my V goes to my move tool. Now there's a few missing shortcuts that don't ship by default, but that are super helpful, and let's add those now. The first one is move object at selection. So let me just go ahead and open my subtool palette so we can see the different versions of the move tool. So clearly the move layer does exactly what it says is move layer. If you notice in the tool property palette, there's two options. One is called move the object at the clicked position, and the other one is move layers in the selected area. So if I go ahead and turn both of those on, then what that allows me to do is just go ahead and click, and then it will go and find, right, just like in Photoshop, by hitting the command button, it'll go and find that layer and move it. And if I click up here, then it'll find that layer and move it. So those two have to be either on or off for the move tool to behave that way as it does in Photoshop. So what I've done is I've created two versions of the move tool. One is called move layer, and then one is called move layer at objects, which it does not ship with Clip Studio by default. So how do we do that? We'll just trash that for now. I'll control click that button, say duplicate subtool, and we'll call this move layer at object. We'll hit enter. And for this version of the subtool, we'll just enable those two things. So that one is move layer, and this one is move layer at object. Now, I don't want to be selecting this tool every single time I need it. I want it to behave with some kind of modifier setting. So let's go up to Clip Studio Paint and go to the modifier key settings. We want to make sure that we're on our move layer tool, or else we'll have to go ahead and here and find it. So so if I'm on the lighter pencil and I go to modifier key settings, it'll auto load that in. So again, we'll go back to the move layer, modifier key settings, and this menu can look really confusing at first, but if you understand what's happening, it's very, very powerful. We want to make sure that we're choosing settings for each process of tool. What this means is that if I select common settings, whatever I do here is going to apply to all the tools uniformly. But when I select settings for each process of tool, now I'm going down to the tool level and setting it just for that tool. So what I'm saying is that when I'm on the move layer and I click command, I don't want it to use the common setting. I want it to change the tool temporarily to this new tool that I just created, which is in the move layer category, and it's called move layer at object. I'll hit OK and hit OK. So now, even when this is collapsed, and let's say I'm on my, I'm on my brush tool, and I click the letter V to get to my move tool, but now when I command click, it's now switching temporarily to the secondary tool that I made and behaving like the alternate version of the move tool in Photoshop. Again, so I have my move and then my command move, or you can set it to whatever you want, Control or Alt, and now you'll get that nice, you're able to select your layer by clicking and it'll move that layer. The other thing I want to do is set duplicate layer to Command J. That's normally found right here in the menu, duplicate layer, but that's a hassle to get to every single time. So let's go ahead to the shortcut settings. We'll change this over to main menu, go to the layer menu, and set duplicate layer. This is set the exact same way. So if this wasn't here, I would just click in that empty space and hit my shortcut. I'm setting Command J because that's what it is in Photoshop. And now when I hit Command J, I have now duplicated that layer. The other one is insert layer into group. That's the same as Command G in Photoshop. So if I shift select those two layers, I go to the menu and I say create folder and insert layer, it's basically grouping it into a layer folder. So I also want a shortcut for that. So we'll go to the shortcut settings, and that is also in the layer section. It's under create folder and insert layer. That is now set to Command G. The last one is merge selected layers, which I've set to Command E. Next, I want to set the letter D to reset the foreground and background color to black and white. That is under the options section, drawing color, and switch main color to black and subcolor to white. So no matter what I'm on here and I hit D, I'm reset back to black and white. Like in Photoshop, X switches between the foreground and the background color, and of course C switches to paint with opacity and paint with transparency. One of my other absolute favorite features of Clip Studio, in case you didn't know about it, but it basically turns any brush into an eraser. So I'm painting with black and I just hit the letter C and now I'm erasing out. Don't have to make a new eraser brush with the same texture. I'm painting with those exact same textures as all my brushes. In my opinion, one of the best features of Clip Studio. Next, I want to be able to set the opacities of my brushes to the numbers 1 through 10. So let's go back to the shortcut settings. This time we'll go to options, but now under tool property palette, and they're all listed here. Set opacity to 10, from 10% all the way to 100. Just go down the line, double click in there and put your numbers 1 through 0. and that will be all set. So now I'm painting, and now I'm going to 50%, 70, 20. You're not able to go so granular like in Photoshop, like 23%. I never found that I was doing that anyway, but just hitting the major 10% is enough for me. Next, let's set the adjustment layers. Again, in Clip Studio Paint, they're called correction layers. Those are found in two places. Like we mentioned before, you can actually add a new correction layer to the layers palette, or just like in Photoshop, you can just give a tonal correction to that particular selection or layer. Of course, it doesn't add it in a non-destructive way, but we want to be able to access that as well. A lot of these aren't set by default. So once again, we'll come to the shortcut settings. This time we'll go to the main menu, edit, and these are under tonal correction. So set them to what you like, but if you want to set them like Photoshop, you'll have Command U for hue saturation, Command L for levels, and let's go ahead and set Command B for color balance. And the only difference with Clip Studio is that for curves, you're not able to set it, at least on the Mac, to Command M, because Command M is hard-coded to hide that window, and I don't think you can change it. So I've set mine to Option M. It does take a little while to get used to, but once you do, it's no big deal. The last shortcuts that I've added are the same thing as what happens here, which adds an actual new correction or adjustment layer to your layers palette, except I like to do that with my keyboards. That's also in the main menu, and it's also under the layer palette, and we'll say new correction layer, and again, hue saturation, levels, tone, and color balance, except I've added this shift. So, you know, pretty basic. Levels straight up is just Command L, but Shift Command L is going to give me a new layer. All right, I hope that was helpful in letting you see how customizable Clip Studio is, and maybe give you some ideas about what you can do with your own workspace. Hope you get some painting or drawing in soon. Make sure to like and subscribe. I'll be doing some more time lapses soon, as well as some more videos about color theory and animation. So stay tuned, and thanks for joining.